In 1779, a young textile worker from Manchester, England, named Ned Ludd, feared the loss of his job and livelihood due to the introduction of new machinery that looked to replace him and his fellow textile workers. So he took matters into his own hands and smashed the machines. Other textile workers heard of his actions and followed in his footsteps. When the authorities asked them, "Why did you do what you did?" they said they were taking orders from General Ludd, and it was the start of the Luddite riots across England. During the 1980s, Sears was one of the biggest department stores in the world. Mainly operating in the US, their headquarters was the Sears Tower in Chicago, which when it opened was the world's tallest skyscraper. But during the 2000s, they were facing significant pressure from other low-cost retailers. So they moved into a newish market known as online shopping and pioneered a lot of the techniques we now take for granted, such as click and collect, free online shipping, and marketplaces for other companies to sell their goods. During the 2000s, Blockbuster was a $4.8 billion movie rental business with thousands of locations throughout the world. When one day, a heavily in debt, online-only DVD mail order company made them an offer. If they bought their company for $50 million, they would run all the online parts for Blockbuster. Blockbuster, seeing little to gain from this deal, decided to pass. The man who made him this offer was named Reed Hastings, and his company was Netflix. During the 2010s, Nokia was king of the mobile phone business. But facing stiff competition from the likes of Apple and Google, they released their range of iPhone killers. Unfortunately, they weren't up for killing much, and by 2013, Apple was now king of the mobile phone business, with Google not far behind. Nokia, sensing impending doom and unwilling to shift to Android as its operating system, turned to Microsoft, who was also playing catch-up in this new smartphone era. So Nokia sold themselves to Microsoft for 7 billion euros, with the hope that they could marry Nokia's hardware know-how with Microsoft's mobile OS and claw their way back into relevancy in the new smartphone era that happened to be shaping up without either of them. So how did a company that essentially existed since the 19th century essentially sell itself to a competitor? Why didn't Blockbuster see the changes that are coming from the internet and buy Netflix when they had the chance? Why didn't Sears face that competition head-on instead of moving into a newish market they didn't know all that much about? And, well, what really made the Luddites riot the way that they did? Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk, Navigating Complexity in Complex Software Systems. My name is Gosai, and I work at the BBC. And for any of you that haven't heard of us, we're the British Broadcasting Corporation, which essentially means we create content that goes out on TV, radio, and the web for the British public. And our company mission is to inform, educate, and entertain people. Now, I work on the digital side of the organization, better known as a product group, which houses all of its digital services. But more specifically, I work in the mobile group, which houses all the main mobile applications built by the BBC, such as our streaming services, such as iPlayer and Sound, as well as our news, sports, weather, and children's services like Bitesize. Now, each of these teams are supported by dedicated multidisciplinary teams, which in turn are supported by back-end teams that provide all the APIs to power these services. Now, I work as a principal tester across the mobile group. And what I'm particularly interested in doing is establishing a culture of quality, which is one where we don't just inspect for quality by testing for things at the end of the development process, but one in which looks to build quality in at every level that we work, from the products that we build, into the processes that we use to build them, and into the very interactions of the people who use the processes to build the products. And I call this approach quality engineering. If you'd like to learn more about how to build quality in and through all the different layers, then check out my newsletter where I talk about this and many other topics. But the way in which I do this is by spending time with teams and the people that work in them to see how we can do things better, faster, and cheaper. But most importantly, sustainably for those teams. And if there's been one thing that I get into with a lot of my teams, it's this: change. It's everywhere. From whether you're working in the office that day, or coming in or working from home, to your team's ways of working, and whether or not you still got a job that day. Now, some of those changes, they're easy for us to handle, and things pretty much carry on as normal. But other things, well, they cause all sorts of disruptions. Now, those easy to handle changes are so because we can easily predict what is and isn't going to happen. And so you could say there's high levels of certainty. But those disruptive changes, well, it's hard for us to predict what is and isn't going to happen and how it will affect us. And so you could say there's high levels of uncertainty. And the types of disruptions those uncertainties can cause can be quite simple, from people simply going along with that change with the hope that, hopefully if I just do this now, everything will go back to normal. With other people seeing it and going, management just doing management things and simply ignoring it. Other people see those changes going, and no, not for me, I'm out of here, and they leave. And other people see those changes coming, and they fight, they push back, they protest, they try and stop those changes. And the reasons why we behave this way can be many, but ultimately, what we're trying to do is get ourselves back towards certainty, something more predictable. And it's often because we tend to experience uncertainty as quite an uncomfortable sensation. And so our bodies are almost trying to motivate us to get us back to something more comfortable. But what is it about uncertainty that makes it such an uncomfortable sensation? Well, our senses are constantly taking in information from our environment, which all passes through a part of your brain known as the amygdala. Now, when the amygdala detects a stressor in the environment, it sends a signal to your hypothalamus, which tells your adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys to release adrenaline. And the amazing thing about this process is that it happens even before the visual centers of your brain have had a chance to detect what that stressor is. It's automatic. And that's why when you're watching those scary movies, and even though you know that killer is about to jump out of that victim, you still jump. That's your amygdala at work, trying to protect you. Now, as that adrenaline courses through your body, it brings about a number of changes, which will be classified as putting you into high alert. And the types of changes this causes can be things such as your senses becoming sharper, so you can see and sense things much quicker. Your heart rate increases, so you can get more blood around your body. Your breath rate increases, so you can get more oxygen into your body. And your blood sugar levels increase, so you've got energy to do things. And it's when these changes happen that it allows us to start shaping our behaviours. But if that stressor remains in the environment, your adrenal glands will release cortisol, which helps you maintain that high alert status. And once these changes happen, you then start to be able to detect them, which then allows you to start shaping your behaviour. And we often interpret this in one of two ways. We either see this as excitement or fear. And there's a thin line between these two states. And often the difference between the two is a story we tell ourselves about change in the environment. Now, if that stressor remains in the environment, it will push us into the fear response. And we can often respond in one of four ways. The first two you'll be quite familiar with. We can either respond in the fight response, which is physically or verbally attacking that stressor, with the hope that it will then go away and you remain in certainty. And the flight response, which is physically distancing yourself from that uncertainty and hopefully getting you back towards something more certain. The two others are the freeze response. You see animals do this, which can actually develop further into a faint and a flop response. A faint response being you lose control of your limbs and consciousness, whereas a flop response is where you lose control of your limbs but you remain conscious. Now, the faint, flop, and flop response are all about making you a less of a threat to that stressor, and hopefully it just passes on by. And then the final one is the fawn response, or submission, which is essentially making friends with the stressor with the hope that it no longer sees you as a threat and leaves you in something more certain. Now, these responses are not bad as such. They've evolved over millions of years and essentially there to protect us. And you can quite easily argue they've got us to where we are today, so it can't be all that bad. But the thing is, our brains can't tell the difference between a bear and a change in your team's ways of working, and can invoke your high alert status to any potential change in the environment. And that's why we find uncertainty such an uncomfortable sensation. Now, not every situation is going to lead to a fully blown fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. As individuals, we can respond in much milder forms. And when we work in groups, well, we can react differently still. So, what happened to these groups and organisations? Well, the Luddites were brutally repressed by the British government, and the new looms pretty much took over the textile workers. As for Ned Ludd, well, when they went looking for him, they couldn't find him. And a lot of historians now believe he was a made-up figurehead just to get the riot started. As for Sears, well, they filed for bankruptcy in 2018. A few stores did remain open, but unfortunately, it's a fraction of its size and dominance that it once had. As for Blockbuster, I think we all know what happened here, but they also filed for bankruptcy in 2010. And one store in Oregon did remain open and was even listed as an Airbnb for a short while. As for the Nokia-Microsoft deal, well, Microsoft wrote off the deal in 2015, laid off nearly 8,000 workers, and eventually sold the brand rights for Nokia for $350 million. And so what each of these case studies show us is that it was uncertainty of what the new looms would bring that caused the Luddites to riot the way that it did. It was uncertainty of what the low-cost retailers would do to Sears' business model that caused them to flee and move to online. It was uncertainty of what the internet would bring that caused Blockbuster delay and not buy Netflix when they had the chance. And it was uncertainty of Apple as king of the mobile phone business that caused Nokia to sell themselves to a competitor. Now, to be fair, these situations are much more complex than I've made out. The Blockbuster deal is similar in that it wasn't just the internet that caused them to delay, but it's the fact that they were wedded to their traditional business model of late fees that caused them to delay and not move faster in the new internet era. But you see, in this complex world, trying to deny, ignore, blame, or distort uncertainty is just going to lead to more anxiety and fear and all those irrational responses that come towards it. But you see, we often think change comes out of nowhere and all of a sudden it's happening. But usually, the signs have been in the environment for quite some time. Let's take Nokia as an example. It was Apple that dethroned them as king of the mobile phone business. And when Steve Jobs unveiled that iPhone, it looked like it came out of nowhere. But if you look at the 12 key technologies that power the iPhone, not a single one of these was developed by Apple. They weren't even the first to put them into a mobile phone, but they were the first to uniquely put them into what became the iPhone. And so what this illustrates is that change doesn't come out of nowhere. And by becoming more aware of your environments, can help lower the impact of uncertainty. So, how do you become more aware of your environment? Well, by adopting certain mindsets and behaviours. In particular, what you want to do is develop humility in that we don't have all the answers. We need empathy because we need to support each other. And curiosity in that there's always more to learn. Now, how do you develop these mindsets and curiosities? Well, I'd like to focus on curiosity here because I feel like it leads to two others. First, what even is curiosity? Well, it's a special type of information seeking that's internally motivated. And what it is cultivating a desire to want to know things without having an actual need for them. And what this does is acknowledges that there's uncertainty in our environment. Things we don't know, things we don't understand. So, how do we actually cultivate this curiosity? Well, there are 4 steps. First, what you want to do is wonder. And this is about cultivating that curiosity about what's going on around you and why things are happening the way they are. And what this does is gets you asking questions, which leads to step 2. Discuss those questions with other people. They don't need to have the answers, they just need to be willing to share their perspectives and views. Then observe yourself and others. What are you doing? What are they doing? Is it helping? Is it hindering? Is it helping to reveal more information or less? And the final step is respect yourself and others. Are they ready to discuss these things? Are you ready? And by cultivating your curiosity about the world in this way, helps you not only improve your curiosity, but also it's embedded in empathy, as other people may not be sure about what's going on, but also humility, as you're sharing what you do and don't know. And so, as well as cultivating your curiosity this way, you also want to feed it high-quality information, such as reading blogs and books, a lot of which you can find for free online. By attending training courses, either self-funding or asking your organization to pay, or finding free online ones. Or by attending lunch and learns and meetups, a lot of which are free in most major cities. And also attending conferences like this one, to learn from other people from around the world. Now, learning about the world in this way works pretty well for things that have a clear cause and effect relationship. For instance, you can learn about car combustion engines and planes this way. This is something that's well known and understood and has been done very many times. You can learn about programming languages this way too, in that all programming languages must follow specific syntax and rules in order to compile and execute. But we're not all going to become proficient car mechanics or software engineers just by reading a couple of blogs and watching a couple of YouTube videos. Why? Well, both these things are pretty complex. And so in order to understand that complexity, you need to be able to break it down so you can learn about them. But complexity means different things to different people. And so we need a consistent way to be able to understand what that complexity is so we can break it down. And this is where we can borrow some ideas from the Cynefin framework. And what Cynefin does is it enables us to make sense of this complex world we live in and respond accordingly. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time to go into the full Cynefin framework, as I'm only going to focus on a very small, but in my opinion, very important part of it. But I highly recommend checking it out if you've not heard of it before or it's been some time since you last looked at it. Now, Cynefin does something really interesting. You see, we often see things that are complex and complicated as synonyms, essentially different words that mean the same thing. It's just semantics. But what Cynefin does is differentiate between these two terms in a very specific way. You see, things that are complicated are not simple, but they are knowable. For instance, not everyone knows how a car works or how a plane flies, but some experts like car mechanics and flight engineers do. So cars and combustion engines and planes are complicated. Programming languages are similar, in that not everyone knows how to write code, but some people, like software engineers, do. So code is complicated. Now, things that are complex are also not simple, but they are never fully knowable due to the infinite number of variables within the environment, some of which we can see and some of which we cannot. And so it tends to exhibit a special type of behavior known as emergent behavior. Essentially, you don't know what it's going to do until it does it. And what you tend to find is any system that has large numbers of people in tends to be complex. For instance, things like hospitals and banks. where this gets a bit tricky is with software systems. Our software systems are getting so complicated that no one person can know it all or do it all. And technology is moving at such a rate, it's getting better, faster, and simpler looking too. It often feels like we can do more with less than ever before. Just think of all the cloud services or whatever package manager supported by a programming language or operating system of choice. All vastly simplified using other people's tools and processes without you having to understand how they work. We can simply just start using them. And it often reminds me of this XKDC comic strip on dependency. And before you know it, our complicated system is actually getting really highly complicated. And so modern code is actually built on top of other people's code. But all that complication is abstracted away by neat little interfaces. And often, we don't even know the foundations we're built on top of. And so, in order to handle that complication, we work in multidisciplinary teams that become interdependent, with the hope that all those different skills and abilities will understand how all those systems fit together and work. But the more people and teams you add, the more geometrically complicated the lines of communication between those teams become. And before you know it, you don't know who knows what and how much. You just have to trust that they do. And all of this has a compounding effect on the amount of complication within our software systems. And so software systems actually become complex, not complicated. So what does all this mean? Well, because software systems are a complex process with lots of hidden unknowns and dependencies, it means it makes it hard to predict how changes to it will affect its behavior. And so this leads to high levels of uncertainty and how those software systems behave. And so what's our go-to approach to get us back to certainty and keep us there? Testing. That's the reason why we test, because we have uncertainty in how our software systems behave. And so we use testing to try and catch as many bugs as we can possibly find in these software systems. And the greater that uncertainty is, the more likely our stakeholders and our own high alert systems are going to be invoked. And the more reassurance they will ask us to help them lower it. Now just imagine if they knew the full extent of our uncertainty. Yeah, best keep that quiet, right? And so we use testing to try and catch as many bugs as we possibly can, with some teams using more exploratory methods, what some may call manual testing, with other teams doing more automated forms. Now, this approach works quite well for systems that have a clear cause and effect relationship that everyone can see and understand. But that's not what's happening. Our software systems are not getting more complicated, they're getting more complex too. And our traditional way of testing to lower that uncertainty is going to cost us more time and money, slowing down your organization's ability to release the value that makes them tick. So what are we going to do? Well, we could, and not a lot of people are going to like this, do less testing, just ship it, see what happens. But that's probably going to increase that uncertainty, not decrease it the way as we thought. So that might not be a great approach. I know. Let's add more testers. Let's do more work in less time. But that's probably going to increase the lines of communication in your team, not decrease it as we hoped, which is probably just going to increase the complexity in that code base, which is probably just going to increase that uncertainty, not decrease it as we hoped. So that doesn't seem like a great approach, but hey, it's also going to cost a bit more money as well with all those extra people. I know, more automation, that will solve the problem. But that's probably going to increase the amount of dependencies within your code base, again, making it hard to understand what is and isn't covered within that automation, further increasing that uncertainty. So that's probably not going to work too well either. And not to mention, these two last approaches is pushing testing towards the end of the development process. So the longer you're sat in the point of when you made the change to find out if that change actually had an effect, further increasing that uncertainty. So none of these look like great approaches, but hey, teams still try. And so what these approaches are actually doing is framing testing as bug catching. We do testing to catch bugs. So our default approach to the complexity problem is to do more of the same. Do more testing, catch more bugs. But what if we reframe testing? What if we reframed it as uncertainty reduction? And instead of asking, how do I do more testing? We start asking, how do I reduce my uncertainty? And what this does is gets us curious and asking questions. But what kind of questions do we want to be asking? Well, the first thing to recognize is that getting to complete uncertainty or 100% certainty is probably impossible. But finding meaningful ways to lower yours and your stakeholders' certainty is well worth exercise, because it's going to be less likely they fall into all those kind of, let's say, irrational responses that come with that uncertainty. The other thing to recognize is that there are no best practices here. Each of our situations is unique to our circumstances and our situations. And so there's no way I can tell you what to do and how to do it. The best people to do that are those that are closest to the work, the engineering teams, all of you. But what we do have are good practices. And in particular, we can borrow some ideas from the Cynefin framework. And what Cynefin suggests we should do is, when working with complexity, is we should be probing, sensing, and responding. We should be probing to better understand what we do know. We should be sensing in order to assess what we could do. And we should respond based on what we've now learned. And what these steps do is get us asking very specific types of questions. So, probing. What should we be doing here? First of all, you want to be understanding who has the most uncertainty within your teams. And what is causing that uncertainty, and what is an acceptable level of uncertainty for those people. Then, what options do you have to lower that uncertainty? And followed by experiments or spikes to assess which of these options work best for us. This leads us to sensing, which is all about what have you learned from those experiments? And you want to share that with your stakeholders. How do they feel about those options? Is it lowering that uncertainty to an acceptable level? And would more combined approaches work better in this situation? And then constraints. What could cause us issues with these proposals? Do you have the time, money, and people to be able to actually do this? And then respond, which is all about action. Decide on which proposal and carry it out. And then check, has it lowered our uncertainty to an acceptable level? And repeat until that uncertainty is lowered to the point that is acceptable. And for each of these approaches, you still need the core mindsets of curiosity in order to be able to learn and share what you do and don't know. Humility, because of what you may know may be incomplete or incorrect. And empathy, because those spikes and experiments you may run, they may well fail. So you need to be able to work through that failure and try again. And what this approach does is enable us to better understand where our uncertainty is, what could be causing it, and finding meaningful ways to help you lower that uncertainty within your teams. And start to recognize that testing isn't the only way to lower that uncertainty, but one of many tools that you have at your disposal. So, to recap, what have we covered here today? As the saying goes, change is inevitable and will most likely lead to uncertainty. Now, we are biologically predisposed to react to that uncertainty. And if left unchecked, well, it can lead to some quite interesting outcomes. Now, we can't stop our brains from reacting to that uncertainty. but we can, with time, teach it a better way to respond and show that its first reaction was probably just a tad over the top. Now, unfortunately, our world is not getting simpler, but more complicated and complex too. And if we let that uncertainty build, it will lead to greater misunderstandings in the behavior of our software systems, which will make us more resistant to change and desperately trying to hold on to the status quo. What we need to do is become more aware of our environments by probing, sensing, and responding, which enables us to embrace change and work through uncertainty. And by reframing testing as uncertainty reduction, it becomes one of the many tools that we have at our disposal and helping us to lower that uncertainty. So to finish, as the saying goes, change is inevitable and will almost certainly lead to uncertainty. We can fall back to our default evolutionary reactions, or we can decide to respond in a different way. And often the difference between these two states is the story we tell ourselves about change in the environment. So thank you so much for listening to me today. If you'd like to learn more about my sources and further reading, then check out this link. And if you'd like to learn more about how to build quality in and creating cultures of quality, then check out my newsletter where I talk about this and very many other topics. I think we might be out of time, but I'm going to be around for the next 2 days anyway, so I'd love to hear what you think. If you've got any questions, comments, or opinions on how you're going about lowering uncertainty, or if you completely disagree with everything I said, come see me. I'd love to know what you think. Thank you very much, everyone. Right. We might have time for questions. I don't know what time. Yeah? We've got time. Any questions? Any comments? Anyone wants to share anything? Everyone's blown away. Or is everyone desperate for a coffee? I don't know which it is. Oh, go on at the front. Okay.
And I think at the beginning you mentioned building a quality what's environment?
Culture of quality?
Yeah. Culture of quality. Was there resistance to that?
I do it secretly. They don't know I'm doing that. So I don't lead with, hey, everyone, I'm here to build cultural quality. It's more about kind of, okay, what kind of systems and processes and approaches are we doing? And sometimes it's just about reframing certain situations and kind of highlighting, oh, that's actually building quality, and oh, that's actually inspecting for quality. And actually, could we be doing more to build quality in? And so it's about getting the language right first and actually then grounding that in practices that they can actually follow through with. So it's not about how do we create a new culture? That's nearly impossible. It's about kind of behaviors and thinking and kind of encouraging people to act in a particular way and making certain behaviors easier to carry out than, let's say, other types. So the way I kind of lead with that isn't going, hey, everyone, we're now in a culture of quality. It's what could we be doing to building more quality in rather than just traditionally just inspecting for quality. That's not to say we don't inspect for quality. We do. It's still one of the best ways to understand how your products work. But it's about learning from that inspection and then going, well, how do we then take that information to build it back in again so we're not constantly coming across the same bugs and issues that we would do traditionally? Is that any question? Yeah, thank you. Anything else from anyone else? Oh, okay, got a few. Okay, one right at the back and at the front and then front again. That's you? Yeah.
Between the different teams can also cause the more problem, it makes more complex or complicated. But if we discuss about the connecting, discuss those things, it makes more communications and doesn't cause more complicated.
Okay, so if I've understood your question, and everyone can hear what you said, it's about kind of how more communication could increase the amount of complexity in the team. So asking more questions could actually make it harder to understand what's going on, yes?
Like reframing cause more
Right. Okay. Yes, I got you. Okay. No, good question. Potentially, yes, it could. But this is where kind of structure becomes really, really important in teams. You can shove people into a room and just go, "Hey, talk about X, Y, Z," and they will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and those meetings will just go on forever and ever and ever. What you really want is kind of creating structure. What are we talking about? What's in topic? What's out of what's in scope? What's out of scope? And so one of the best things that leaders can do in this space is creating the structures to allow those types of conversations to happen and help people understand we're discussing this, we're not discussing that, and this is how we're going to do it, but then letting those people have those discussions. So you're right in that more conversation could lead to greater complexity, but it's about the framing and the structures you put around it to enable those conversations. So what the Cynefin framework helps with this is helping you understand what are we actually trying to do when we're in this complex space. So you're trying to sense, probe, and then respond. And so that gives you a lightweight structure to kind of get started, and then you can put further structures around that if you so need it. So hope that answers your question. Simon, pass. Was it yourself? Did you have a question? Yes. So, I'm trying to understand your question. So what's the uncertainty within the team? Or so you're trying to understand where the uncertainty is? Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. So I guess in this context, it's very much about the teams, but it's about understanding who your stakeholders are and where that uncertainty is coming from. The likelihood is it's not just the team that has uncertainty. They're not going to be your only stakeholders. There's going to be other business people within the organization, and including your end users to some degree, they're going to be another stakeholder. They might not have a direct say on what the product is and how it goes about it, but you can understand what they want from your systems. So it's about firstly identifying who your stakeholders are, and so maybe doing some sort of stakeholder mapping, and then figuring out, okay, can we talk to these people? Can we understand where their types of uncertainty are? What do they want from these systems? And then you can start getting an idea of a lot of what the uncertainties they have within that system. So that can be a really good place to start. But it depends on where your focus is within the team and then working from that point onwards. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions anyone wants to share? Yep, one up front.
Let's say hypothetically that you wanted to introduce this to a team or to an organization. Is there like any concrete examples that you can use as leverage to get the organization on board with? Just like this general idea, or is there any concrete, like this is an example that used it and
Good question. The way I would start is start small and then go big. So find a smaller team first that's actually genuinely interested in working these ways. Find the people, the low-hanging fruit ultimately. Which team is interested in doing this and start with them. They're going to be the easiest to get on board. You don't have to try and convince them. They're already there. And then it's like, okay, well, what do we want to apply? We want to reframe testing from bug catching to uncertainty reduction. Okay, how do we then do that? I'd start with Cynefin framework. I think that's a great place to start of kind of breaking down your team's work and then figuring out where the uncertainties are within that team and then work from that point onwards. What I suggest there is using that team as a kind of like a test bed and then kind of selling that to the next team and then the next team and the next team. And then once you've got a couple of case studies, you can then sell that to the rest of the organization and go, we've been doing this is how well it's been working. Who else is interested in getting on board and slowly build momentum that way? It's much slower, but you start with the places that are interested rather than the teams that are kind of like, we don't care, we don't want to know about this. You're not going to win with them. So trying to convince them, it's just not worth it. They're going to need more data. So find the people that are already interested and work with them first. That's the way we've been doing it. Cool. Got another question? 2 questions. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so 2 questions. First one was, how do you measure the uncertainty? And I'm trying to understand your second question, which is, where do you implement these ideas? So like, is it within particular disciplines or within particular teams? Is that where you're going? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Okay, right. Your question, your second question, much more complex. Let's answer the first one first. That might be best. Okay, so how do you measure uncertainty? How long's a piece of string, right? It's one of the hardest things to try and measure. So what you want to do is find some proxy measures. So what you want to do is actually kind of talk to the people first and figure out where their uncertainty is. That gives you an idea of kind of what is their uncertainty and where is that coming from? That will then give you a basic idea of kind of where they are. And so there is no kind of system that you can use to measure that uncertainty. What you want to do is try and understand what that uncertainty is, and then you can then start from that point creating maybe a scale around that. And then you can then start asking questions on, okay, these are all the other types of uncertainty. Which of these do you find more or less uncertain based on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever it is? So there's no specific system you can use, but you can use proxy measures. So there's no kind of defined kind of system. For your second question, come talk to me afterwards and we'll probably get into it. I think that's time, folks. I'm still around for the rest of the day. If you want to ask me more, come see me. Thank you very much, everyone.